Hello and welcome back to Ayaz. In this tutorial, we are diving into Tailwind CSS animations, a powerful way to bring your web projects to life. Have you ever visited a site where elements move and interact in a natural, engaging way? Animations catch the eye, guide users, and make interfaces feel lively. Traditionally, adding such animations meant writing complex CSS keyframes from scratch, which can be tricky and time consuming. But Tailwind CSS makes it much easier. It provides convenient utility classes that let us add animations with just a few class names. No need to write custom CSS for common effects. This means we can make elements spin, pulse, bounce, or fade with minimal effort, keeping our styles consistent and our development speed high. In this full tutorial, we will start by setting up Tailwind CSS in a project. Then we will cover the fundamentals of Tailwind CSS animations, how they work with CSS keyframes under the hood, and the built-in animation utilities like animate pulse and animate bounce. We'll do the live coding exercises for basic beginner-friendly animations and then move on to customizing our own animations intermediate level using keyframe in Tailwind's config and the Apply Directive. We'll even look at some advanced techniques like creating one-off animation with arbitrary values and triggering animations on user interactions. Along the way, I'll highlight best practices like making your animations accessible and smooth and point out common mistakes to avoid. By the end of this tutorial, you'll have a solid understanding of how to use Tailwind CSS to add animations to your projects, whether it's for suitable UI feedback or elaborate effects. So let's get started. Before we play the animations, we need a Tailwind CSS environment setup. If you already have a project with Tailwind configured, feel free to skip ahead. Otherwise, let's quickly set up Tailwind CSS in a new project by following the official steps. So this is the official website. Go to the documentation. Docs. Okay, so we will be using the Tailwind CLI here. The simplest and fastest way to get up and running with Tailwind CSS from scratch is with Tailwind CLI tool. The CLI is also available as a standalone executable if you want to use it without installing Node.js. So here you will find further information about it. Anyways, so let's install the Tailwind CSS. For that, install Tailwind CSS and Tailwind CSS/CLI via npm. So I'm assuming that Node.js and npm is already installed in your computer. So just copy this command, open the terminal and go to the directory where you want to start this project. I will create a new folder with the name Tailwind CSS animation tutorial. So let's go to the Tailwind CSS animation tutorial and let's open it in our editor. I will be using the VS Code, so let's do that. Alright, the project has been opened in our editor. So open the terminal in the root directory of your project. Once opened, paste that command npm install and wait for it. While it is being installed, let's read the step 2. So it says import Tailwind in your CSS. So you have to just import Tailwind CSS in this way. You just need to add import keyword with Tailwind CSS. And this is going to be your source input file, but this is not the file that would be used to render in your HTML. There would be another CSS file that would be generated after the build process has been done. So I will show you shortly. Alright, it has been installed. Now let's create a new folder here, src, and within that I will create a file input.css. You can name it anything else, it's totally up to you. So copy this line of code, paste it here. Now we will start the Tailwind CLI build process. So we will run the CLI tool to scan your source files for classes and build your CSS. So this is the line of code, and here you can see we are specifying the path of the input CSS, and here you would specify that where you want to create the output generated file. So we are also using the watch flag that would run this process in the watch mode, so that if you make any further change, it will compile or build it every time when you make a change. So it will watch and detect that change and immediately run it again. So copy it, and actually let's go to the package.json. I will create a script here like this and build watch. Okay, you can name it anything to this script. Okay, I have pasted that command here. Now you just have to run this command npm run build watch every time. With that, you would notice that a new folder would be created actually new file would be created in the source, because we have specified that the output.css should be created in the source directory. So it has been created. In the input we had the import statement, and the output we have all of the base code that is required to use this Tailwind CSS in our code. Okay, excellent. Now start using Tailwind in your HTML. So add your compiled CSS file to the head and start using Tailwind's utility classes to style your content. So let's copy this piece of code, go to the source, create a new file, index.html, and paste this code here. Alright, make sure you have specified the correct path of the output, and for me this is correct, so let's test it. To test it in browser, you can directly open it in the browser, or you can install an extension that I already have installed. Let me show you. It is dev server, I guess. Actually it is a live server extension. If you install it, you are able to run any index.html or HTML file like a live server, and it would run it in the watch mode. That's mean if you make any change in that HTML, it would immediately reload it in the browser automatically without needing you to reload it manually. Alright, right click on that, click on the open with live server, and you would notice that it is opened and Tailwind is currently working. Now let's quickly look at CSS animations and keyframes. Before we use Tailwind's helpers, let's recall what CSS animations are. In plain CSS, you typically define an keyframes rule that describes how an element's styles change step by step at various percentages from 0 to 100. You then use the animation property to apply that keyframe animation to an element with options like duration, easing, delay, and iteration count. In essence, CSS animations let you animate the values of CSS properties through keyframes. For example, you could define a keyframe that moves an element from left to right or fades it in and out, and then apply it to an element to make it animate. Now Tailwind CSS abstracts a lot of this. It comes with a set of built-in animation utility classes that encapsulate common keyframe animations. By default, Tailwind includes 4 animations: spin, ping, pulse, and bounce. These classes are all prefixed with animate, like animate-spin or animate-pulse. And they apply predefined keyframes and animations properties to your elements. Under the hood, Tailwind's default CSS contains keyframes for these effects like spin, ping, etc., and ties them to the utility classes. For example, animate-spin uses a keyframe that rotates an element continuously, and animate-pulse uses a keyframe that rotates an element continuously, and animate-pulse uses a keyframe that fades the element's opacity in and out. And you don't have to write those keyframes yourself. Tailwind has done it for you. Each built-in animation class corresponds to a specific use case. For example, the animation-spin, it rotates the element in 360 circle indefinitely, a continuous spin. This is commonly used for loading indicators, for instance, a spinner icon on the loading button. Then we have the animate ping. It scales and fades the element in a ripple-like way. It grows and fades out repeatedly. This looks like a radar ping or water ripple, perfect for drawing attention to something like notification badge or live status dot. Then we have the animation pulse. It actually gradually increases and decreases the element's opacity, creating a gentle fade in out. This is often used for skeleton loaders, placeholder UI while content loads, to give a subtle loading animation. Then we have the animate bounce. It moves the element up and down as if bouncing. This can be used to grab attention in playful way, like a scroll down arrow indicator bouncing at the bottom of a hero section. Each of these runs indefinitely by default and uses a standard timing and speed defined by Tailwind, which you can override, as we'll see. There is also an animate-none class that you will see here to explicitly disable the animations if needed. It's important to note that CSS animations, like that is also called keyframe animations, these differ from CSS transitions. Animations can keep running and have multiple stages defined by the keyframes. Transitions, on the other hand, are simpler. They smoothly change a property from one value to another, often on a state change like hover. Tailwind provides separate utilities for transitions like transition-opacity, duration-300, etc., which are great for hover effects or toggling UI. Don't worry, we'll mention transition briefly later, but our main focus is on the keyframe based animations. Just keep in mind, use animations or keyframes for more complex continuously running effects or sequences, and use transitions for one-off state changes. A common mistake is to use an animation class when a simple transition would be more appropriate. For example, you wouldn't use animation-pulse for a hover fade, you would use a transition class. With the fundamentals out of the way, let's start using some of these Tailwind animation classes in code to see them in action. Tailwind's built-in animation utilities are the easiest way to get started with animations. We can apply them directly to the HTML elements, so let's go through the 4 default animations classes with real examples. Follow along by typing these into your HTML and viewing in the browser to see the effects. First one is the spinning loader with animate -spin. So one of the most common needs is a loading spinner. Tailwind's animate -spin makes an element rotate continuously. We can create a simple spinner using just a div with some styling. So let me show you how we can achieve that. So this is my tab. Go back to the project and I am going to remove this heading. In the body I would add some Tailwind classes to bring everything in the middle. So here I would add a flex, flex width full, and you can also say width screen, and height should be equal to screen height, and items should be in center, and justify should also be center. So this would bring everything perfectly in the middle of the screen so that we could see our experiments clearly. So first I will add a div, and within that div I will add a class. Within that class attribute we will add all of our Tailwind CSS classes. So add animate -spin. By the way, an interesting thing that you would have noticed that you would see these suggestions here, that when you start typing something like I type flex or f's, you will see all of these classes are Tailwind CSS classes. And why these are coming and from where these are coming? These are actually coming because of an extension that I have installed that you should also install. So it is very helpful. The name of the extension is Tailwind CSS. So if you install it, it is called Tailwind CSS Intelligence. If you install it, then you will have all of these suggestions in your editor in VS Code, and then you would not have to remember all of these classes. So it is very helpful. Now let's type animate -spin, then h-8, then h-8 means height of 8, then width of 8, then border of 4 on 4 sides, on all of the 4 sides, and border color should be blue -500 is the shade of the blue, because when you type blue dash you would notice we have all of the available shades that we could use of blue. For example, we by default we have the shades starting from the 50 to 950, and it is getting darker when number is increasing. So let's use 500 here, then border -solid, then we have rounded -full, and rounded -full makes add the border radius, and then border -t means border top should be transparent. So save it. Now let's go back to the browser, and oh, by the way, you have to reload it. I don't know why I didn't reload, but if that does not work, you should reload it. Okay, after I reloaded, it started to work. You see the spinner with the animation, and it is happening because of this. Okay, if you remove the animate spin, then you would notice that it would be stuck here forever and it would not be rotated. If you add this class, then it would start animating once again. So let's break down what's happening here. The animate -spin adds a linear infinite rotation animation that is called 360-degree spin. The rest of the classes like H4, H8, W8 border dash 4, border dash blue dash 500, border solid, rounded full, border T transparent are just to style the div as a circular ring with a border. This particular combination creates a common spinner look, a blue circle with a missing top border. The top border is transparent, so you get a spinning quarter ring effect. You should see a blue ring spinning clockwise. This is great for loading indicator. In fact, Tailwind's documentation mention using animate-spin for exactly things like loading indicators. So feel free to adjust the size or color by changing the classes. For example, currently we have the height and width 8. You can set it to 12 or whatever you prefer. Let me change it and save it. For bigger or a different border color, you can also slow it down or speed it up using Tailwind's duration utilities. We'll try that later in the customization section. Next we have ping or pulse notification with animate-ping. Let's simulate a notification ping effect like a radar ripple indicating something needs attention. Tailwind's animate-ping scales an element up and fades it out repeatedly. Typically, you use it with a colored dot or circle to create a spreading ring. We can create a small red notification dot that pings. So let's quickly implement that. I'm going to delete this and add a span with classes relative. This would add position relative, then inline flex, then height of 4 and the width of 4 as well. So classes are added. And now let's add a span with class absolute. This would add position absolute as implies from the name of the class. And so most of the classes of Tailwind are self-explanatory. You would immediately understand what's happening because of that class. So absolute means position absolute of CSS. H-full means height should be 100%. So let's keep adding them. H-full and then W-full, then rounded full, then BG-red 600, then opacity 75, then animate ping, enter. After that we need another span here, span with classes position relative, then H-4, then W-4, then rounded full, then BG-red 600, press enter. Okay, now let's quickly test it. You have to reload it once. Okay, look at this. How cool is that? So here we have structured two spans. The outer span is a container with relative positioning and a fixed size, 4 by 4 pixels, a small dot. The first inner span is the ping effect, absolutely positioned to cover the full area with a red background, BG-red 600, 75% opacity and animate-ping. This span will continuously expand outwards and fade. The keyframe makes it grow and become transparent. The second inner span is a solid red dot with relative positioning just to keep it in flow that sits on the top of the ping. This remains visible at the core dot. The result is a dot that has radiating ring effect. This could be used for new notifications, incoming messages indicators, or anything that needs to draw the user's eye. Tailwind describes animate-ping as a useful for things like notification badges, exactly what we did. If you want a different color, just change the BG- classes for both spans. You can also adjust the size by changing the H-4 and W-4 on the container and inner spans consistently. So let's quickly make a change here. Instead of blue, maybe we want instead of red, maybe we want blue here and here as well. And maybe you want bigger width. Instead of 4, I would like to add, I guess, 8. Yes, 8 is available. And we want height 8 as well. Save it. Now you will see that it is much bigger and in a different color. Also, if you want to understand in depth that what every class is doing behind the scene, you just inspect it and you would see all of the styles that Tailwind CSS has written for us behind the scene. So for example, if you click on this, it has the bg blue-600 class, and in the styles on the right side we have the bg-blue-600 with the proper regular CSS style background dash color with a variable where they are passing a variable to set that specific color. Also, we added the rounded full, so that means they are adding the border radius and calculating something with infinity and I guess they are multiplying it with 1 pixel, but whatever they are doing is it is making it circular. So you can look at it and have in-depth understanding if you want to. Okay, by the way, it was not that much bigger. I zoomed it, but this is how bigger it would look like. This is at 100% zoom, and it would look like this at height and width of 8. Okay, all right, now let's look at the subtle loading state with animate dash pulse. Another common UI pattern is a pulse animation that often used for skeleton loaders or to indicate an action is in progress in a subtle way. Tailwind's animate dash pulse gently fades an element in and out of the opacity. Let's use animate dash pulse on a button to simulate a loading state like a form submission button that is processing. Okay, so I'm going to delete this part again and add a button with classes. First class would be animate dash pulse, then we will have bg dash gray dash 500, and after that we will have text dash white, then we will have font dash semi bold, then py dash 2, then px dash 4, then rounded. That's it. Save it. So now when you view this, the button text and background will periodically becomes lighter and then return to a full opacity, creating a pulsing effect. So let me actually add some text in it as well, submitting. So this is what it is looking now. So this is a great way to show that something is happening without using a spinner. In real use, you might swap a normal button to a pulsing one after the user clicks submit. Many sites use a pulse effect for skeleton screens as well. For example, gray blocks that pulse to indicate content is loading. In our example, the button is gray with white text. We used bg-gray-500 for a medium gray background. You can style the button however you like. The key part is the animate dash pulse class. So for example, you can change the color from gray to blue, and look at this. So if you search on internet, you may find several examples with the Tailwind CSS skeleton, like in the Flowbyte, and there are many other websites they are providing the source code. So for example, look at this. In their own official documentation, they have displayed the use cases. This is a nice button. They have added this ping animation, and then they have displayed how you can achieve the skeleton animation by using the animate dash pulse. So this is how it would look like. So you can, if you like it, you can easily copy paste it as it is. That is the beauty of the Tailwind CSS. What you will like, just copy and paste, and it would start working immediately. Paste it here. That's it. Now go back here, and here you reload it. You would notice that it is now working. Okay, it is now showing that skeleton. You can feel free to make any change to make a better or more personalized skeleton if you want to make. And after that, they have this bounce animation, so etc. You can scroll it and discover yourself as well. Anyways, next thing is attention grabbing bounce with animation dash bounce. Finally, Tailwind offers the animate bounce with animate dash bounce that makes an element jump up and down intermittently. This is more playful. A classic use case is a scroll down arrow that you can see here on screen at the bottom of a landing page, bouncing to encourage users to scroll. It can also be used on icons or buttons that you want to draw attention to, maybe a download button bouncing once in a while. So let's create a simple bouncing arrow indicator. So I will delete it, and here add div animate dash bounce text dash 3xl, and within that you will put your icon. So I added this icon. Now go back to the browser, and you would notice that how it is jumping or bouncing, all because of the animate dash bounce. You can increase the text size as well from 3 to, there are many other options, like I guess it is up to 9 XL max. Save it, and this is how it would look like. Okay, so this uses a downwards arrow character, makes it bounce. We set text dash 3 XL to make the arrow large. You could also use an SVG icon or any element. Just applying animate dash bounce will give it that translate Y motion. The built-in keyframe moves it up and down 25% of its height. If you put this at the bottom of the section, it provides a visual cue for the user to continue scrolling. It's a small touch, but it can improve the user engagement. There is a tip for you. The bounce animation runs indefinitely by default. If you want it to bounce only a few times or start or stop under certain conditions, you would need to customize it. We'll touch on controlling the iteration in the advanced sections. Also, bouncing is fun, but use it sparingly. Too many bouncing things on page can be distracting. We just tried out Tailwind's 4 built-in animations with real-world style examples. First one was the loading spinner. Second one was the notification ping. The loading spinner used the animate dash spin. It's great for loading states on buttons or pages. In notification ping, we use the animation dash ping class that draws attention to status indicators or alerts. Then we discussed the pulsing placeholder that used the animate dash pulse. It's an excellent thing for skeleton screens or subtle progress feedback. Then we looked at the bouncing arrow or icon that used animate dash bounce to playful guide user attention. For example, scroll down prompts. These require zero custom CSS, just Tailwind CSS classes. They cover a lot of use cases. However, what if you need a different animation or a variation of these? That's where customization comes in. Next, we'll learn how to create our own animation in Tailwind and how to tweak the existing ones. Tailwind's default animations are handy, but you are not limited to just those. We can define custom keyframe animations and use them via Tailwind classes. Tailwind allows us to extend its config to add new animations. Alright, earlier we used to configure or extend the theme our customization. We used to edit the tailwind.config.js file, but in the latest version we don't need that anymore. As it is saying in the documentation, one of the biggest changes in Tailwind CSS in 4.0 is shift from configuring your project in JavaScript to configuring in CSS. So instead of tailwind.config.js file, you can configure all your customization directly in the CSS file, where you import Tailwind, giving you one less file to worry about in your project. So this is how you can do. For example, you would simply in your main CSS file where you have added this import statement, you just have to add this theme selector, and within that curly braces you can customize or override or add additional changes. So for example, we were on the animation page. On the documentation on the bottom there is a text saying learn more about customizing your theme in theme documentation. If you click on that, here they have provided a proper documentation how to extend it. So for example, if you add this font dash script and this, then here you are basically defining a theme variable and you are extending the default theme. This makes a new font dash script utility class variable that you can use in your HTML, just like the default font dash sans or font dash mono utilities. So they added this variable. Now you are able to use it directly like this. Okay, so other than that, you can override the default theme, like override a default theme variable value by redefining it within the theme. So they just changed the value to 30 rem. Now SM variant will trigger at 30 rem instead of the default 40 rem viewport size. So to completely override an entire namespace in default theme, set entire namespace to initial using the special asterisk syntax like this. And this is the actual thing that we need to focus on as we are talking about the animation. We can define animation keyframes. Define the keyframe rule for your dash animate dash star theme variables within theme to include them in your generated CSS. So for example, here they have used created this animation fade in scale and created the keyframe in this way. Okay, so now if you want custom keyframe rules to always be included even when not adding and dash dash animate dash star theme variable, define them outside of the theme instead. Now let's walk through an example. Let's suppose we want an element to do a little wiggle, rotate slightly left and right. A fun effect maybe for an icon when a user hovers or as an error indication. This is not built in, so we'll create it. So let's open our file input.css and let's add the custom animation inside this file. So we'll add two things, a new keyframe definition and a corresponding animation property like in the documentation. So I'm actually going to copy paste this as it is so that we could follow the same structure here, but we will have different scenario. So in the keyframes, we'll name it wiggle, and at 0% we will have only transform. Let me remove it. Transform rotate dash 5 degree. Okay, I have added the rotate dash 5 degree, and then same thing should be for the 100 as well, but there is another part 50% where I will add transform rotate positive 5 degree. Okay, now we need to define the animation here. So wiggle 0.5 second for us, and here should be ease in dash out, and it should be infinite. Save it. Now let's quickly test it. Our animation name is wiggle. So and don't forget our live server is running, that is building it continuously on every change, so it should be available. So go to the HTML, and here I would add this piece of code. So that is basically using inline block text to Excel and animation dash wiggle. By the way, another very interesting feature of Tailwind CSS is that here when you type animate dash, it would show you the additional animation that you just created customly, that is wiggle. So if you create multiple animations or multiple custom classes, those would appear here automatically. So select that, save it and reload it. You would notice that this wiggle effect is working. It is moving the hand with the wiggle effect. So let me quickly explain what we did here. We defined a wiggle keyframe animation. At 0 and 100% of animation, the element is rotated minus or negative 5 degrees, slightly tilted left, and at 50%, it's rotated positive 5 degrees, tilted right. So over one cycle, it swings left, then right, then back to left. We then created an animation entry named wiggle that uses those keyframes. The value is wiggle 0.5 second, ease in out infinite is basically the CSS shorthand for animation. It's using the wiggle keyframe with a duration of 0.5 second and ease in out timing function and infinite iteration. Once you save this configuration, Tailwind will generate a utility class for it. The key name wiggle in the animation object becomes the class name animation wiggle. So if you open the built output.css file, you would find it. So let me quickly demonstrate you that what happens if we change, but before that let me show you the wiggle. You will see that this wiggle name has been added here in several places. The keyframe is also created. So this is because we added the custom animation. We extended the theme. If you make a change in the name, for example, instead of animate wiggle, you can say animate XYZ, and you have to change here and here as well. If you save it, then you would notice that animate wiggle is removed. And if you search for XYZ, it should be added somewhere. It did not add it because we did not use it yet. So go to the index.html, and here if you start typing dash, you will see that the new animation or class is available to use. Just use it. So this is the beauty of the Tailwind CSS. It does not generate the CSS until you use it. So you see that I was not using it. I was using incorrect class. That's why I did not include that part of CSS. But as soon as you will save it, you would notice that it would be added here immediately. So that would keep your CSS size small and keep your application faster. So here in index.html, I have applied the animate dash XYZ or wiggle to a waving hand emoji. Make sure to set inline dash block on the element being animated, because if it is an inline element like a plain emoji or text, applying transform may not work properly. By making it inline block, the emoji can rotate you should see the hand emoji twisting left and right in place as if it is waving. This demonstrates a custom animation. You can adjust the keyframe to change the angle or style of the wiggle. You can also adjust the animation properties. For example, 0.5 second duration could be made 1 second for slower wiggle, and you can remove the infinite and instead control when it runs, maybe trigger it on hover with the class. So another example, let's say we want a fade in animation. So that is a common need for models or elements that load in. We could add another keyframe set in the configuration. So let's do that. I will revert it back to the wiggle name, and after that I would add an extra animation. I will use add animate fade in, and here I would add fade in 2 seconds, ease dash in, and 4 words. Okay, I think something is wrong here. Let me put it on the top. Maybe it is not showing correct colors because we did not define this keyframe yet. So let's quickly define the keyframe with the same name, keyframe, and here the name is fade in. Actually there should not be dash, that's why it was not showing correct colors. Now it is fine. So we will start implementing the fade in. I will just copy this line so that I could reuse. So on 0% its opacity should be 0, and on 100% its opacity should be 1. Okay, now it is available to use. Let's go to the index.html, and here let's add the wiggle back. So basically what we did is that this defines a fade in animation that takes 2 seconds, easing in and uses 4 words, so that element stays at opacity 1 at the end and doesn't fade out again. We would then have an animate fade in class we can use, for example on our model container when it appears. So let me demonstrate that. Here I am going to add a div with class animate. Actually let me add it as it is, div, and it is model container, and within that div I will add a class, and you would notice that our new animation is available. Just type animation animate dash fade in, it is available. Just use it, and here look at this. If you reload it, it would appear with fade in effect. Okay, excellent. So you notice that this would smoothly transition from transparent to opaque. The forwards in the animation ensures the final state, fully opaque, is retained. The process for any custom animation is similar. Define keyframes in config, then define an animation using those keyframes. Tailwind will generate the class for you. You can create a quite complex animation this way. You are essentially writing plain CSS keyframes, but you get to use a utility class to invoke them. While testing our custom animation, if animate-wiggle or your custom class is not working, double check your config is properly updated and saved. The rebuild rerun that we have in the terminal. If not, restart the npm run dev or Tailwind CLI. The class name should match the config key that you have added in the input.css. For example, if you named this wiggle to like this, then the class would be animate-wiggle2. Ensure the element is in the DOM with that class like we did here, and not hidden by something else. Assuming all is well, and you now have working custom animation in Tailwind. We saw how to add custom animations with Tailwind. There is another technique for customization, the Apply Directive. The Apply lets you compose utility classes into your own CSS class in a style sheet. This can be useful if you want to create a semantic class name for a certain combination of Tailwind utilities, or if you want to adjust an existing animation without editing the config. For example, imagine we want a variant of the spin animation that is slower. We could have updated the config or theme to define a new animation with a longer duration, but we can also do it quickly with the Apply. Let's create a class named spin-slow that spins an element slowly. So open your CSS file, input.css. This is a file where you included this Tailwind CSS. We will add a custom CSS rule. It's a good practice to add it within Tailwind's layer system so that it meshes with Tailwind's generated CSS properly. We can put it in the components layer or utilities layer. For this example, we will use the components layer. So on the bottom, I would just add layer and components space, and here I would add spin dash slow and then apply space. Now you will notice that after you add apply, it will start showing you all of the Tailwind classes in the suggestions. So we need animate dash spin, then duration dash 1000. Save it. So what does this do? We create a new CSS class dash dot spin dash slow. Inside apply animate dash spin duration dash 1000 pulls in the styles from Tailwind's animate dash spin and duration dash 1000 utilities and applies them to spin dash slow class. Especially dot spin dash slow now has the same effect as writing those classes on the element directly. The duration 1000 is a Tailwind utility that sets the animation duration to 1000 ms, that is 1 second. By default, animate dash spin uses 1 second duration, so this might actually be the same speed in this case, but if we wanted, we could set it to, let's say, duration of 2000 ms, that is 2 seconds for slower spin. So let me add 2000. Now we can use spin dash slow in our HTML. So for that, go to your HTML, and here I'm going to add flex direction items flex call to set the direction column for it, so that we could see things vertically like this. So now below that, I'm going to add HR tag just to separate things from each other, and now I will add a div spin dash slow, then h dash 8 w dash 8 dot w dash 8 border dash 4, then border purple dash 500, then border solid, then rounded full, then border dash t dash transparent, press enter. Okay, now we just added the spin slow class and all other features. So now let's reload it, and you can see it is now spinning. And if you remove this class, then it would not spin anymore. So it is spinning only because of the spin slow that is defined in input.css. And here we have added the animate spin and duration of 2000. You can decrease it to 100 to make it slower. Actually, it would be faster. If you increase it to 5000, that would be 5 seconds. So now you will notice that it is very slow. So this is similar to our earlier spinner, but using our new class, if you changed the duration to 2000 ms, you will notice this spinner rotates more slowly than the default. The advantage of this approach is that we didn't need to touch the Tailwind config or define new keyframe. We just reused the animate dash spin and tweaked it with a utility class for the duration in the input.css. You could also add other utilities with apply. For example, you might include ease linear or repeat dash 1 if you wanted to only run once, although controlling iteration count might still require a custom keyframe or using the arbitrary value method in Tailwind JIT or just in time, which we will cover next. Another use of apply could be to bundle multiple classes into one. For instance, if you have a button that should always be bouncy and styled a certain way, you could do this by adding another class here in the components, button bounce, and then apply animate dash bounce, then bg dash blue dash 600, and then text dash white, then font dash bold, then py dash 2, then px dash 4, then rounded. Save it, and now go back to the index.html. You can use the class button dash bounce. So let's add a button first, button dash bounce, and let's add this is a button, that is the text. So with this way, we would just add this class in HTML instead of writing all of those classes that we added in the CSS file each time. It's a matter of preference and how you want to organize your code. So if you do that, you will notice that how it is working. And if you want multiple buttons, you would just copy paste it, and you are just reusing the same collection of CSS classes, Tailwind CSS classes, without rewriting them. So you are reusing, that is saving your time and efficiency. Keep in mind that apply should be used in moderation. If you find yourself reusing the same combination of classes a lot, it can be helpful. But if it's truly one-off, adding a custom class in CSS might not save you much compared to just writing the utilities on the element itself. In our spin-slow case, if you only needed it once, you could have just put animate-spin duration spin and duration-2000 on that element and been done. On the other hand, apply shines if you need to use that pattern in multiple places, or if you want a clearer semantic class for certain components. So now we have two ways to customize the animations. First, via the Tailwind theme customization that we did above here for more integrated reusable utilities like animate-wiggle, and then via apply in CSS for quick combos or minor tweaks like spin-slow. You can choose based on your needs. At this point, we know how to use Tailwind's preset animations and how to create our own. Let's look at a few advanced techniques and tips for Tailwind animations that can help in more complex scenarios. So first one is one-off custom animations with arbitrary values. Sometimes you might want to customize an animation for a single use without adding a new class in your CSS or config. So Tailwind's just-in-time or JIT mode allows arbitrary values in square brackets for many utilities including animations. So this means you can write a completely custom animations CSS value on that animation on the fly in your HTML. The syntax would look like this. So for example, let me zoom in. So this is how syntax would look like: animate dash animation name, then actually let me show you from the internet instead of typing all this. Tailwind CSS arbitrary values. So here you would notice this is how you can add arbitrary values. Okay, you can read through this documentation. So you can specify as many parts as you need, omit any that are not needed within the bracket separated by the underscores. For the animation there are underscores. Let me quickly write this for you here. So for example, recall our wiggle keyframe we added. By default, we set it to 0.5 seconds, ease in out infinite. But what if we want the same wiggle motion somewhere, but only want to run 2 times over 5 seconds with an ease in out? We could add another entry in the CSS, but instead of doing that, we can do it in one line in the HTML. So go to the HTML. This is our code where we added that wiggle. So here we have I am going to just remove all of this, and instead of that I would add inline block, then I would add animate dash, and here you would add wiggle 5s ease dash in dash out underscore 2. Okay, and after that I would add text dash 2xl. Save it, and here let's reload it. You can see it is waving but very slow because we have added 5 second ease in out. If you add 1 second, it would be quick, you can see, and it would stop after 2 iterations because we have set it here. So basically this is still using our custom animation. You're not bound to the built-in animations. You can still use the custom animation that we created, and then you can further customize it in one single line. You don't have to make or override them here, or you don't have to create multiple versions of it. You just type. So let me actually show you the difference. Earlier we had just this animate wiggle, and this added this thing on it. Let me show you. This part means it did let me add a comment. So this animate dash wiggle would add this. Okay, but if we do this animate dash, and instead of wiggle we will just add square bracket to add arbitrary values. So we added the name, that is the basically name of the animation. Actually I should have copied this one, that was incorrect. So here, now that makes more sense. So this means we added this line 0 wiggle 0.5 second is in out infinite. Okay, but if you want to customize all of these values, you just put the same name of that same custom animation wiggle, and underscore you would add the duration in this way 1 second. So every value would be separated by the underscore. Then we want to override this value, so we will add another underscore, and then instead of is in out you can change it, but for now we kept it as it is in out. And after instead of infinite with underscore we added 2. So let me actually write down what it makes. So after that I would add a comment. Let me basically copy paste it here. So this line would make wiggle here. Let me add 5 and make it 5 seconds here. Is in out, and instead of indefinite it would add 2. So this would add basically this style in the inspect element. I would show you that as well. So let me go there and reload it. So we added to both of these versions, so you will see the difference. This is faster and this is slow. Go to the inspect element and let me show you. So here, look at this. This class added this style animation wiggle 5 second is in out and 2 that I explained you earlier. And this one, if you click on this, not this one, you would notice it has added a different animation. It is just passing the animation as it is that we created in the form of variable in our input.css. So it would use it as it is, but if you want to override it, you can do that, and it would then hard code values in this way. Okay, perfect. So here, this animate dash square bracket these values. This tells Tailwind apply an animation that uses wiggle keyframe, runs for 5 seconds, uses ease in out timing, and iterates 2 times. Then it would stop. Tailwind's just-in-time engine will generate the necessary CSS for the specific animation on the fly. So let's copy this and go to the generated CSS, that is output.css. If you search for it, you would notice that it has generated that part of the CSS for us. Okay, make sure that wiggle keyframe or whatever name you use are defined somewhere. In our case, we did define wiggle in our input.css theme customization section. If it was not defined, the animation name would be unknown in CSS and nothing would happen. Browser would see animation name property in the styles area in the inspect element, but with no keyframes for that animation that you have specified. Tailwind itself doesn't know the keyframe details from the syntax. It just inserts the string. So you still need the keyframes definition either in Tailwind config or in global CSS file for that name. So for example, here it is not compulsory that you put it here. You can put it outside of this section as well. It would still work, but it should be somewhere globally so that it could be accessible. So this arbitrary animation feature is very powerful for quick experiments or one-off cases. You could, for instance, do animate. Let me actually type it while I'm saying. You could do something like this. Let me duplicate it. And here you can say animate dash spin underscore 3s underscore linear underscore 1. Save it and reload it. Something like that. So you can do this to spin something once over 3 seconds. So you can see once, this is for once over 3 seconds. So it will take 3 seconds but it will rotate only once. But you can increase the number of cycles to 3. Now look at this. 1 is completed, and once all of the circles are completed, then it would stop there. Let me reload it. Count. So 1 circle is started, and second is started, and third one is started, and after that it would stop. Look at this, it is stopped. Okay, so we did that without adding a new class in our input.css or in the custom theme section. It saves you from custom configuration or custom CSS bloat when you only need a custom animation in a single place. Next, we will talk about the combining animations with states, hover, focus, etc. Tailwind allows you to use variants like hover, focus, group hover, etc. with animation classes just like any other utility. This means you can make animations play only on certain states or in response to interactions. So let's look at the on hover. For example, you could have an element that wiggles when you hover over it. So let me quickly show you. Here, let me remove all of these buttons, and I would keep only one button with the classes. Actually, let me add it first. Button with the text, hover me for a wiggle. And now let's add some classes. First one would be hover colon, and name of the animation animate wiggle. So we are adding condition that apply this animation only when you are hovering on it. Then add transition dash transform class, and duration should be of 500 milliseconds. Okay, so let me quickly show you. So look at this. This is hover me for a wiggle. Currently it is not wiggling, but if you hover, it will start wiggling. So here we prefix the animate dash wiggle custom class or custom animation with hover, so it only applies on hover. I also added transition transform duration and duration of 500, so that when it stops wiggling on mouse out, it doesn't abruptly snap. This ensures a smooth transition back to the normal state. So for example, look at this, it is wiggling. If you hover out, it will be back on its normal state. This combination of CSS transition with triggerable animations can create nice effects. You might use this for something like an icon that gives a little shake when the user hovers to indicate it's interactive. Next, we will talk about group hover or focus. You can also trigger animations on one element when hovering another by using the group utility. For example, let me show you here. I would add a parent div with class group and p-4. Group is also Tailwind CSS built-in class div, and within that I will add a class. Yes, group is already built-in class. Then p-4, then bg-gray -100, then inline block like this, and within that I would add a span that would say hover the avatar to bounce it. And now let's add an avatar image on the top here. Image source avatar.png. I will add the correct URL shortly, and here I will add some classes. First one is inline block, then group hover animate dash bounce. Okay, so now let me quickly get avatar URL. So here let's copy this one, right click on it, click on the copy image address. That would give you the URL of that image. So let's just paste it here like this, save it. All right, the image size is too large. I will reduce the size by adding W16. Great. All right, if you hover anywhere on this parent container or anywhere, it would start bouncing. So I'm not hovering on the avatar itself, but animation is added on the avatar, but I'm not hovering on the avatar. I'm hovering somewhere else, but it is still bouncing. So if you have a parent with class group, you can use group dash hover animate on a child to animate that child when the parent is hovered. This is great for things like making an icon jiggle when hovering on a card, etc. Similarly, focus or focus hover, etc. can be used if you want an animation on focus. Let's say a button pulses when focused, perhaps as an accessible highlight. And one thing to keep in mind that with triggerable in animations, if an animation is not set to infinite, it will only run for its duration and then stop. For example, if you have an element with animate bounce, not infinite, Tailwind's default bounce is infinite, but imagine a custom one that runs once. If you hover again later, it might not replay unless you re-render or re-add the class, because the element is already in the end state of the animation. Infinite animations always run, but single run animation might need a reset. This is more of an edge case, usually using hover :animate selector with our class with infinite animations like bounce or pulse is fine, since they start immediately on hover and stop on unhover. Now let's quickly talk about the reduced motions. Not all users appreciate animations. Some get motion sickness or prefer minimal motion. Such users often enable reduced motion in their system preferences. As a best practice, we should respect that. Tailwind provides the motion reduce and motion safe variants to help there. So for example, here we have motion dash reduce animate dash none. So this can be used to turn off animations for users who prefer reduced motion. So if you add that, then that would be working out of the box. Then you will also have motion dash save dash dash. There you will have your animations. This can ensure an animation only plays if the user has not requested the reduced motion. So for example, if we have a spinning loader, we might do it like this: animate dash spin motion dash reduce :animate dash none. Okay, so this means normally apply animate dash spin, but it prefers reduced motion is on, then apply animate none, which overrides spin. The result is that motion sensitive users would see a static icon instead of a spinning one. Tailwind's documentation even shows using motion safe to only spin if allowed. For example, this piece of code, motion dash safe animate dash spin. This will not spin for those with reduced motion setting. Be sure to include these in any long running or large animations if accessibility is the concern. It usually should be. You can still do a lot by chaining classes and using delays. Tailwind has utilities like delay dash time. For example, here let me show you like this. Delay dash, here you can specify the time, or even you can use animate, and here you can add delay like this. For example, here you would be using the custom animation like wiggle or something like that with the help of the arbitrary values to stagger animations. For example, you could give a series of element classes like animate fade in, delay 200, animate fade in, or you can use, instead of that, you can animate fade in and delay 400. Okay, to make them appear one after another. So this doesn't require any JS and can create a nice entrance sequence. Also remember that you can animate multiple properties by defining keyframes that change several CSS properties at once, position, opacity, color, etc. Tailwind's role here is mostly to help you to apply those animations easily. You might combine a Tailwind animation with other Tailwind classes like transform, translate, -x, etc. For an initial state or using transitions for hover, the possibilities are wide. Now that we have covered the advanced tips, let's summarize some best practices and common mistakes to keep your animations effective. So when adding animations, a bit of forethought can make the difference between a delightful user experience and a distracting one. Here are some best practices to guide you. First, have a purpose for each animation. Ensure your animations serve a UX purpose like drawing attention to a feature, providing feedback, or improving visual flow. Animations should enhance the interface, not just be there for decoration. Use them thoughtfully to guide users or give clues. For example, a shake on an incorrect password field draws attention to the error. Next one is keep animations subtle and contextual. Generally, subtle animations means small movements, fades can make the UI feel smooth, whereas big jarring motions can distract and match the style of animation to your content. For instance, a professional dashboard might use gentle fades, while a fun kids site might allow more bounce or wiggle. Consistency is key. If everything bounces, nothing stands out. So use the playful effects sparingly for emphasis. Next one is use CSS transitions for simple state changes. Don't overuse keyframe animations where a simpler hover focus transition would do. For example, for hover color changes or modest size changes, use Tailwind's transition utilities like transition or transition dash colors, duration dash 300, etc. For smoother, lightweight effects, save keyframe animations for cases when you need ongoing or more complex movements. Next one is optimize performance. Animations can impact performance, especially if misused. So stick to animating properties that are cheap for the browser to animate. For example, opacity and transform are the best. Tailwind built-ins largely animate these. Avoid animating layout affecting properties like width, height, top, or left position if possible, as those can cause reflows each frame. Tailwind's animate classes like spin, ping, etc. are optimized. They use transforms and opacity. If you create custom animations, try to do the same. Also, don't animate huge elements or lots of elements at once if you can help it. Next one is respect user preferences. As discussed, implement reduced motion support. Use motion reduce with the value animate none or motion safe variants to disable or limit animations for users who have expressed that preference. This is an easy inclusion that greatly improves the accessibility. Next one is test across devices. Check that your animations look good on different screen sizes and devices. Sometimes an animation that feels fine on desktop might be too fast on mobile or vice versa. Tailwind allows you to adjust or disable animations at certain breakpoints. You can fix animation classes with SM or MD, etc. just like others. For example, you might decide an animation plays on desktop but is animate-none on mobile if it doesn't translate well. Next one is easing and timing. Tailwind's default use sensible easing like ease-in-out, but consider the context. Use linear for constant motion. For example, spinning loader should be linear so it doesn't speed up, slow down every rotation. Use ease-in-out for things that need to settle into place like a bounce ending. Tailwind provides classes like ease-linear, ease-linear, ease-in, ease-out, ease-in-out. You can append to adjust easing. Also use appropriate durations fast by using 100 to 300 ms for small UI feedback. For medium, you should use 500 ms to 1 second for larger movements or emphasis, and rarely more than that except for purposeful slow effects. You can use Tailwind's duration -75 or 100, 200, 1000, etc. classes or define custom durations. Next one is layering multiple animations. If you need an element to do more than one thing, for example move and fade, it's often easier to create a single keyframe animation combining those rather than try to apply two separate animate classes, which you cannot do simultaneously on one element. An element only has one animation style except by writing a combined keyframe. Tailwind doesn't support two different animate classes on one element at the same time, so combine transforms in one keyframe or use multiple nested elements if absolutely needed. One handles one animation and the child handles another one. Use a Tailwind playground. So this is the Tailwind playground, so you should use it. This is a quick tip that when experimenting with animations, you can use Tailwind Play, the official online playground, to prototype your animations, classes and keyframes. It's often faster to tweak values in a live environment. Once you are happy, bring them into your project. By following these best practices, you will ensure your animations are not just cool but also effective and user friendly. There are some common mistakes to avoid that you have to take care of. Even with the best of intentions, it's easy to stumble into some pitfalls when working with Tailwind CSS animations. Here are some common mistakes and how to avoid them. First one is not rebuilding after config changes. You excitedly add new animation in your HTML or in your input.css, but nothing happens in the browser. One common oversight is forgetting that you need to rebuild the CSS or restart the dev server so to see config changes. So for example, we already are running the server on wash mode, but in some cases maybe you forget to start it, so that's why it was not working for you. So always rerun the Tailwind process when you change the config, as the new classes won't exist until you do. Next mistake to avoid is missing template path. Classes not generated. Tailwind's just-in-time mode generates classes based on what it finds in your files. If you add an animate-wiggle class in your HTML but your content paths in the config doesn't include that file, Tailwind might not work. Next one is typos in class names. This is basic but happens often. Writing animated-pulse instead of animate-pulse or animate-spin, missing a letter, etc. Tailwind classes need to be exact. If a class isn't working, verify the spelling. The official docs or IntelliSense, if using an editor extension, can help to avoid that. Alright, now armed with knowledge and resources, you can continue to practice and build creative animations in Tailwind CSS. Thanks for following along with this tutorial. I hope that you found it helpful and engaging. If you think that you found value in this tutorial, then please like and share this video. Also subscribe to my YouTube channel and click on the bell icon to get notified for my upcoming videos. If you have any questions or thoughts or anything you want to mention in the comments, then please feel free to leave them in the comments section below. I would be happy to reply them as soon as possible. Thanks for watching. Happy animating with Tailwind CSS.